which is too bad. All right, so let's get into our best episodes. We'll start.
I will say before we start,
sure.
Looking at the list of best ofs, I do know just by name what happened in most of these. So that's the first instance that they are better than the other episode.
The only one, the one I was most concerned with is actually our first one up here, which is number 5. I was wondering if you would remember this one.
You would have been correct.
Okay. Fight or Flight is the second episode of the show where they run into the aliens that are being drained of their blood on that ship. And they have to figure out whether or not they want to run away or if they want to help those aliens on that ship. You were actually very high on this. You gave it a 4.
Yeah,
initially.
That yeah, that was a good one. That was the first instance of them doing sort of horror stuff and darker, more mysterious stuff really well.
And a very alien encounter for humans going out. Yeah.
Yeah. And they never really figure out why the blood is being,
they meet the aliens, but they never see who it is. They just see the ship that fires on them.
Which is great. That's really, I wish they had done more of that stuff. Like that's coming out of the gate pretty hot for a Star Trek prequel to do something like that and do it so successfully.
It was also an early, related to that ship, it was an early example of the ship being underpowered out there because they tried to fire a torpedo at it and it just shot the torpedo away. So it was a good example of like the humans are not really prepared to go out there, which is a runner they kind of gave up on throughout the season. Like you feel like that's supposed to be a season long arc and it never was.
As soon as they equipped the phase cannons,
the phasers,
everything's on the same level now. We're just a little less powered than just being out there, in like the space equivalent of like a VW bug during the Indy 500.
And as you mentioned, Fight or Flight does another thing that Enterprise, I think, is hardly ever mentioned for doing well, which is it does creepy pretty well for Star Trek. Consistently, it's good at being creepy.
I think they go back to that well a little bit too much this season because that they are consistently pretty good at that. But I think after this one anyway, a lot of times that stuff ends up being a smokescreen for an episode that's not particularly very good.
Yes, they did it well in Silent Enemy, which is the one where the aliens board the ship and they're kind of walking. They're like the CGI aliens that are walking around. I thought that was effective too because they played that like a little mini horror sequence. But I think Fight or Flight is definitely a better example of the story was better than Silent Enemy eventually ended up being, which is why it's not on the list. So number 4 is Breaking the Ice, which we always harken back to as the episode where nothing really happens. And we kind of liked it at the time.
Until something happens and then we just hated it.
Right. until something happened. The comet starts to fall apart is what we didn't like. So this is the one where they find the biggest comet that they've ever seen. And then T'Pol and Trip have a sequence where T'Pol's relationship is in trouble and Trip reads her letter accidentally because he thinks that it's some sort of like secret communication between T'Pol and the Vulcans. And then he feels bad that he read her personal letter too, that she's writing between her and her fiance. We liked it just because we were so enamored with the fact that it was such a low stakes episode of Enterprise down to like the comet being a big comet is a very early very early Star Trek idea. Like they're not meeting an impressive alien race. It's just like, this is a big comet. Let's go check out what it is. And then it gave nice characterization to T'Pol and Trip, I think. And it was like a neat little example of a misunderstanding between humans like Archer and Trip and T'Pol at that point. And it was just kind of a nice gentle plot to sort of get 10 episodes into the season.
Yeah, I do think the failing of this episode, though, is the same failing that Shockwave has, which is they are generating their story based on information that that is just being willfully withheld. Because from the audience, I mean, because if I remember correctly in Breaking the Ice, Trip reads the letter, right?
Yep.
And
Archer tells him to read the letter.
Yeah, Trip reads the letter, so Trip knows what's going on, but they don't talk about it till like the end of the episode. So you've got like 15 minutes where they're sort of dancing around, not telling anybody what's in this letter, which is sort of, I feel like kind of manufacturing mystery.
I like that sequence just because it's Trip goes back to Archer and is like, don't make me tell you what's in this letter. Like, it's like, this was not worth what we did here. It's just it's another, you could maybe say the negative of that. It's another example of Archer doing the wrong thing, but he doesn't really learn a lesson. Like he feels bad. He's genuinely feels bad, but it's not a larger thematic point about like Archer needs to learn to trust his crew. That is what it's about, but it doesn't feel like it's like, and it's not really even, in my opinion, to the detriment of the episode that it doesn't strongly push that on you. It's just like, yeah, Archer shouldn't have done that. Trip feels bad about it. They'll talk to T'Pol, and then T'Pol tells them what the real story is.
Yeah, no, I actually think it's not as egregious as the way that they do it in Shockwave, from my own standpoint. Yeah, but I think that Breaking the Ice overall is pretty solid. That was a good one, which I think we were higher on that one than a lot of the listeners were.
We were, yes. The listeners hate Breaking the Ice. Number 3 is Unexpected, which is another controversial pick, although we both liked it. I gave it a 4. I think you gave it a 3. It's the one where Trip gets pregnant.
Sure.
My defense of it is just that I don't think it's offensively stereotypical or anything. My wife has been pregnant. It's like there's no unfortunate cheap shots that they're taking on pregnant people at this point. And I think that Star Trek never does comedy well, and this episode actually made me laugh a couple times. I still think of the scene where he wants to install child safety gates on the turbo lift thing in the engineering section. I'm like, that's a funny beat to have happen there, and it also introduces the holodeck for canon nerds who are interested in that kind of a thing.
Yeah, no, I remember liking that one. Yeah, I don't think that any of the pregnancy humor is meant in bad taste, I guess, or it's not malicious.
Yeah, it's not angry about it or anything. It's just kind of, yeah.
I mean, I think the trope of the male getting pregnant is pretty worn out at this point. But yeah, I think the other stuff they do in there as far as the contact with the alien species and the accidental mating, if you want to put it that way, is interesting. And yeah,
T'Pol's response, like that felt like an early example of good character interaction where Trip comes back and T'Pol's response is, "You were there for 3 days."
Right.
and this is what happened to you. It's a funny, I was hoping there would be more of that relationship between T'Pol and Archer. I felt like that the series is kind of like crying out for them to have a, who would be the nearest analog to those two in that case? It would be like Kira and Quark almost have that kind of interaction.
Sure. Yes.
And
or even Odo and Quark.
Yeah. I guess I'm putting more of a like sexual tension on it there. So I think it would be Kira and Quark at that point. And I just thought it's kind of funny. It's goofy as hell. It's a very Alien episode again. Early Enterprise episode season 1 were very good at doing the aliens. And the Klingon has a great closing line of "I can see my house from here." He's looking at the holodeck recreation.
I think what's kind of funny about this one, and it's what happens to Trip is debatably he gets raped.
Yep.
However, if you want to look at it from a less than intensely dark angle like that, I do think it's kind of interesting that it shows that it's not just the humans who are fumbling around in interspecies contact. It's this other group as well. Because I remember the alien was like, "I didn't know that was going to happen."
Right. Yeah.
But she's still actively mating with him without his consent. But it's very much like we're all kind of new at this. We don't really know what's going to happen.
Right.
Whether or not that excuses it, I don't know, but probably.
Yeah. No, I guess that's probably the most not troubling, but it's the most it's the line that I think is going to get the most attention from that sequence where she says, "I didn't know that was going to happen." I don't know if people would not complain about the episode being sexist or whatever anymore if you eliminated that and just had it be like I think the problem there is that the aliens also play it as if they know that it is sex, right? So if the aliens were just kind of like, if it was like breathing to them, it's just something that happens all the time. They don't think that there's anything special. I think that it would have soothe that audience reaction a little bit. If it's just kind of like I think we talked about it in the podcast, if it's just kind of an infection that happens, like it's just like, the aliens are more, they aren't treating it like it's some kind of sexual thing. I think it would have gone down easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just relieved they didn't have Trip do that to the alien.
Right. That's that's the more disturbing.
If Trip did it to the alien and ended up pregnant and they were playing it for laughs, I think that's a lot more troubling and problematic and not great. But there's something, I don't know, there's just something kind of innately humorous about the alien doing it to him. I don't know. That's probably bad for me to say, but
number 2 is Shockwave, which is the season finale, which we just covered a little bit ago here. I like Shockwave. It bookends Broken Bow, which is the pilot of this one. And I do agree with the comments that are just saying the theme of the season should have been Enterprise consistently failing to meet their expectations of what they're doing out there. And so the entire season is running along to this idea that maybe we don't actually deserve to be out here, culminating in they intentionally caused this planet to explode. Like it doesn't escape the Suliban put this bomb on our shuttle thing. Like there's actually, we made a mistake and we caused this. Do we have to go back home now? Right. That would have improved Shockwave. I still think Shockwave is really effective for being at least the first 30 minutes or so an effective culmination of Archer realizing that what they're doing out there is not working out for the best and maybe they should just go home. And I think that's an effective way to end the first season. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's they get so close to really nailing the dismount, I think, on this first season by getting into that stuff a little bit. But yeah, then they undercut it with the time war crap and the
Invisible Suliban did this.
Yeah, the Invisible Suliban and the lighter they attached to the bottom of the ship or whatever. It's funny because it feels like a good. I was thinking about this earlier, and I was thinking about it in reference to the X-Files, because the thing that I always forget about the X-Files is the first season of the X-Files ends with them shutting down the X-Files.
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of, the whole season is sort of bits and pieces of Mulder and Scully sticking their nose too deep into the governmental stuff that is the stuff that they should be
off limits. The confidential stuff.
The confidential stuff, which ultimately gets them shut down. And I was thinking about this season in that way, where it's like, that almost feels like the natural endpoint if you're committing to the concept that they're setting up, which is the stuff that they're doing has consequences, and ultimately it ends with a consequence that's so big that their mission gets shut down, or at least that's what it seems like is going to happen.
Yeah.
Which is, so it's a good setup and it's a good idea, but they ultimately kind of hamstring themselves by this temporal Cold War stuff. And also, like I was saying, it has a lot of that. Everybody knows, or Archer knows what's going on. We're not going to show you what's happening. And as sort of a manufactured mystery as to what's going on. And I just don't like that stuff. Yeah,
we both agreed that it's a fairly effective cliffhanger for a season ender, with Archer being stuck in the future. But yeah, I think it's just it worked well in every level except for once they had to tie in the time travel and removing responsibility for the attack from Archer. The concept is really good, and it does pair well with Broken Bow, which is not on this list of our 5 best, but I think would be like right after that. I think at least it's knocking on the door of like 6 or 7.
I'm actually kind of surprised that didn't make the list, because I remember you were very high on it, and I was decently high on it as well.
We both gave it a 3. We probably said it was a high 3 or something at that point, but it was Broken Bow obviously is, I think it's 2 episodes, and one of them is very good and the other one is not very good. Right, it's the second half is the action stuff that I don't care about, but I do think that what Broken Bow does is really well is, like, if we'll consider it an honorable mention here, is that it does, I was having a discussion with listener Kyle on Twitter about it. Broken Bow sets up its premise pretty well. The show doesn't really take advantage of it, but it's a very good setup where it's like, the Vulcans are on Earth in that hospital. They shot the Klingon. Archer's yelling at them. Archer's like, get the fuck out of my way. Like, I'm going to go on this ship. We're going to go. They go without the ship being ready. And it feels like it had the legs to set something up really well. And I think that it's a fairly effective pilot for what Enterprise eventually is, even if it didn't grab it with both hands.
Yeah, I would say so. I do think it is also, it's emblematic of the problem that I think we've had throughout the whole season, which is conceptually good idea, but they don't know, they haven't figured out how to fill out an episode full of the idea. So they generate this TV stuff, I guess is a good way to put it, in order to whether that's an action sequence or this manufactured mystery or building the mystery being the core of the story, which ultimately doesn't make any sense or is not interesting. What episode was that? Wasn't that like a couple episodes ago? There was one where I was really negative on the mystery of it.
Oasis, the Odo Rene Auberjonois one with the ghost people.
Right. I'm surprised that wasn't on the worst of list.
I liked it too much to not get into the worst. Yeah.
But it's sort of, it has all the same problems that even the good episodes for the rest of the season have, which is like good idea, can't quite fill it out. So we have to throw in some stuff that's just like TV filler stuff to get us over the finish line.
And number one on our best episode list for Enterprise is first season is Dear Doctor, which I think is an unsurprising choice for a lot of people who know about this stuff. I thought it was clearly the best episode, like head and shoulders above its contenders. It's head and shoulders above Shockwave. It felt very much like a Star Trek episode. I think you got good character work out of it. There was an actual conflicting moral question about what the right thing to do is. I think that the scene between Archer and Phlox, where Archer is wearing his tight t-shirt and drinking a beer, is probably the best scene that they ever did in the first season. I still like his line, but you're a doctor. That's pretty much it for me. I think it's clearly the best and most well thought out and consistent and all encompassing of all the episodes. I think it's good from start to finish.
Yeah. I mean, it's textbook of take two characters with conflicting ideologies or opinions, put them in a situation where those opinions are tested and see what happens. Mm-hmm. It's and I think T'Pol's involved in there as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I feel like it's dramatic storytelling 101 in that sense, where you've got a moral conundrum. You got your two main characters who are not at odds with each other, generally, who are now put at odds over this moral conundrum, and it generates an engaging story.
Yeah.
Especially because you're taking two characters who you are going into this, as I said before, you understand where they're coming from, because Phlox is a doctor, and you know how he's acted with stuff previously, so you understand where he's going to be. And Archer wants to continue the mission and blah 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 blah, all this other stuff, and he's worried about prime directives and shit. And so you understand where he's coming from. Whereas if this were a scene about the same thing between Reed and Trip, you wouldn't give a shit. Like right. it would have no weight to it.
Right.
It would probably end up with them yelling at each other as though that was like drama and acting.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you put T'Pol in there as well, who you understand who T'Pol is as a character, where she's coming from, as far as her ethos and point of view. So it's not surprising that this one is the most successful.
From 5 to 1, our best episodes for Star Trek Enterprise's first season. Fight or Flight is number 5. 4 is Breaking the Ice. 3 is Unexpected. 2 is Shockwave. And 1 is Dear Doctor. So that's it. The best episodes. Thank you very much.